Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dad Designer podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ced Funches. Hey, Ced, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Good to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about your design background and then a bit about your family?
Yeah, right on. So I've been designing well over 20 years. One of my very first actual real jobs was in the NBA. I was a art director for the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx for around 8 years. I'm originally from St. Paul, Minnesota, so it was kind of a dream come true to work for the local sports team. Learned a lot. Really, in my opinion, kickstarted my professional career working at such a high level. The contacts that I have now, celebrities, actors, that all comes from working in the NBA and kind of making connections from there. I moved on into video games, so I spent a fair amount of time working as a creative director and a director of creative marketing for a video game company. Worked on all sorts of platforms, so Nintendo, Sony, PS4. Got to be a part of the PS4 launch back in the day. And then I kind of moved on into my own thing. I went freelance pretty early in my career. Did a lot of consulting with the NBA and others. I spent some time working in higher education. That was very short lived. Once I realized nothing was getting accomplished, it was pretty soul crushing to work at a college. I was like, oh no, this is terrible. But anyway, kind of moved on into more freelance stuff. From a consulting standpoint, that's what led me to Vox Media. So I worked with Vox Media on re-energizing a lot of their brands and getting them ready for TV and motion and basically bringing them into real life. And then from there on, I've kind of done my own thing. I started quite a few businesses, wrote a children's book, and then I had my son. My son came along, and here we are. So I'm married 17 years. I have a son, Logan. He's 8, and so around 8 years ago is when I started doing a little bit more of a shift of being just more of a family centric person. Career kind of not as much driving the decision making. And be honest with you, best decision I've ever made.
Yeah, two things I want to dive in there is you. So your son's about 8. I believe the children's book you wrote was about 11 years ago. So
Yes.
before he was born. What was the story behind that, and why did you decide to write that?
Yeah, right on. Well, my mom is a cancer survivor. So when I worked for the Minnesota Timberwolves, this is when my mom was going through cancer. She had uh, renal cell carcinoma. So lots of therapy, treatment, chemo. And during my time at the Timberwolves, it was a eye opening when you're going to lose a family member or you're confronted with that. And so, I think that's really one of the biggest motivations I had. And so, when my mom recovered, I told her, I got to write you a children's book, Mom. I know I specifically took my mom for granted during that time.
Mm.
I was younger and I was just more focused on my career. Like I worked in the NBA. So I was on, if there's a cloud higher than 9, that's what I was on during that time. And that really, kind of made me realize just how important my mom was to me. So I always promised her that I would write her a children's book. Working in the NBA, you have absolutely zero time to do anything other than work in the NBA. And so, after my wife and I moved to San Diego, I finally just said, you know what, let me get this book done. It was just something that was a passion project of mine, and kind of started a little nonprofit called Mother's Month to help everybody take more time to just appreciate their moms.
Did you wrote it, illustrated it, did the whole thing yourself?
No, I got an illustrator.
Okay.
I actually had an illustrator. I tried to do it myself, and then I was like, no, this is not going to work. And then I found an illustrator who kind of shared the same similar story, and we worked together on it, and then I self-published it.
The name of the book is A World Without Mothers.
Hmm.
And if you Google that and look, there's a great YouTube video about it as well. I got about halfway through this morning before I was like, "Oh, I can't do this."
Yeah.
uh, it tugs on the heartstrings for sure.
It was, to be honest with you, it was one of the more fulfilling things that I had ever done. I
Mm.
didn't make a ton of money off of it, but just sharing my story on, what I think most people do. Most people just, you take things for granted, not on purpose or just being a bad person, but you don't really think that something that traumatic is going to happen to you or somebody that you love. And it really made me think about my mom and my story when I started sharing that with individuals. This is back Facebook era. So, I had a Facebook page, and, I have celebrity friends and individuals like that, and I wanted to get them involved. So I was like, I called a couple of them, like, hey, I'm going to write a children's book. And everybody, that's kind of how people know me. They're like, okay, Ced, what are you doing next? Whatever you're doing, you got me, dude. I'll support it, or what have you. And when they found out that that's what I was doing, I got Threadless at the time to do a t-shirt competition for honoring moms. A buddy of mine, childhood friend, Colton Dunn, was a writer for Key and Peele. Key and Peele had just got their show, and I had the books. I was going to share the stuff with him, and he's like, "Dude, why don't you come through and we'll get some, let's do some tribute videos. I can just get everybody around here." And I'm just thinking, you get maybe a couple people on the staff, and it was actually Jordan Peele and Keegan Michael Key and all of these guys talking about their mom, and how impactful their moms were in their lives. And I just thought, I mean, it was just such a beautiful thing. I did a couple things with Cancer for College, and it's just, it really helped me to see that you can have just a lot of impact when you find something that is, synonymous with everyone. Everyone appreciates their mothers for what they've done for them, and the place that they've gotten them to. So, it was a really great experience for me.
Yeah, and then I want to talk a little bit about your time at Vox too. I was working at an education startup, and we would create some education videos, and they were like incredibly boring. And there was a group of us at the time that was like, "Do you see what Vox is doing? What Vox is doing with like their shorts on YouTube and like their like 8 minute explainer videos and their whole Netflix explain series and all that kind of stuff." I was like, this is the type of educational stuff that we need to aspire to. Maybe like the whole video isn't this, but like we've got to get some videos that are something like this. Did you
Yeah.
have any part in launching some of that stuff?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was brought into Vox to help bring life to some of the brands that they had purchased. So a lot of those brands were just online entities, and they were, usually, um, I guess, powered by the individuals that were starting those brands. And so I was brought in to, kind of give brand life direction to not only the Vox brand, but The Verge was having a refresh, Eater, Curbed at the time. And yeah, so I led the teams from the branding and the marketing side on how do we bring life to some of these things that, outside of the echo chamber that was Vox Media at the time.
Hmm.
I kind of brought the reality of most people have no idea what you guys are talking about, what you're doing. So you have to make it relatable. Vox.com in particular, it was a journalist first kind of led entity.
Hmm.
And one of the main things that I really, really stressed as far as bringing, this brand awareness to it is you have to explain the news, but you got to do it fast. Like, it can't be these soliloquies on your life and how cool you are and what college you went to in an article. Like, no one cares about that. So summarize the news, make it fast, make it fun. Those were the ethos that we actually did when we helped refresh brand and help the branding on Vox.com. And that led into the podcast series and the short series like that. And essentially helped them get ready for how do we present ourselves to Netflix.
Hmm.
That's really what the goal was.
Yeah, well, it seemed to work.
Yeah, it worked. It worked. It worked a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. That's really cool. Um, yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask about is a bit about your son, and before we hit record, you were talking about, that was like a big trajectory. You're at the Wolves, you're building your way up, and then you mentioned earlier, you had your son and things shifted for you. What changed, and what are you excited about now?
Yeah. Well, I think the benefit that I had was to be surrounded by people who not only were familiar with my work, but they worked with me, or we worked on bigger projects together. And I had a lot of individuals kind of tell me that, hey, said your biggest impact is when you work one to one with clients, or when you're leading some of our uh, client work with the actual pro sports team. And I think that's really where I had the shift of, instead of trying to be, a part of a table, like designers at the time, well, we got to have a seat at the table. I think I realized that I actually am the table. My input is a part of a special process that doesn't need to be diluted by being in management, and then you're in corporate management, and then now you have one-on-one. I was like, nah, I don't really need any of that. Plus, the monetary benefits of not being in corporate America has been astounding, to be honest with you. I don't think that I would have ever thought that I would be this um, happy with the compensation that I'm getting at a freelance level, because you're just kind of trained to start thinking, okay, and if I did this and I can work this and do that. And, again, just having very early people in my life when I first had my son say, come on, man, you can make way more money doing, you know, two or three clients a year. You'd make three times what you're making at this place. And then you don't have to deal with any politics. You don't have to deal with, any of the BS. And you're talking to individuals who've been doing it for 15, 20 years. And so I had to sit down and I thought, and then just the ability to be around my son more was one of the biggest factors in all of that. Like, I always thought of what kind of dad I wanted to be, kind of growing up, and, knowing that we were having a son. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then, I just got to realize that's at odds with trying to climb a ladder or be on a speaking circuit. And it's like, it's cool, but as we look at the landscape of design now, what's the point? It
Mm.
doesn't necessarily prove anything, and it doesn't necessarily mean or equal happiness within your industry or within, your own career. And so when I kind of made that shift, I mean, I like I said before we started recording, I couldn't have made a better decision. I'm a happier person. I call the shots per se. I work with who I want to work with. I am paid what I say I want to get paid. There is no haggling. There is no, well, I think that. I just go, okay, well, goodbye. It's that simple. Like, do you want to do this or not?
Yeah.
And if it is a goodbye, I get to go right ahead and just go work on something that I like to work on, and my family is right here with me. And we had our son a couple years right before the pandemic, and I always tell people, like, best time of my life. I mean, I got to see him grow. I'm with him every day. I wouldn't have had that if I was on the grind, commuting, and kind of dealing with other individuals' drama, and
Mm.
not really kind of dealing with my own drama in my own life.
Yeah. What gives you that level of confidence to like say, but this is how much I'm charging or this is what I offer? So like I think it's two sides of the same coin. What gives you that level of confidence and what gives your clients that level of trust in you? Because I think you've earned that, right?
Yeah, I think there's at some point, I was working with different groups and trying to fit into a mold, and oh yeah, I suppose we need to do it like this. But I think my confidence comes from working at the highest level in the NBA for 8 years. And I achieved what most people are trying to achieve right now. Like, they're trying to get in the NBA. They're trying to, and I'm like, dude, I did all of that stuff. If you go to the Timberwolves office, there's a main hallway when you get down into the administrative office. All of the stuff on the walls is stuff I've made. And like, it's kind of an amazing thing to think about. It's kind of like the wall, the history, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I did all that. I created all this stuff. And I think having that at that level gave me the confidence of, this is the level that most people are trying to achieve at, and it's a level that I know that I could do just like that. Because you work in the NBA, they work you like you're 20 people, but you're just one person. And so I think that's what gave me the reps to have the
Hmm.
confidence. It doesn't work in every environment. A lot of environments, individuals are trying to emulate that confidence for themselves, and so sometimes it's hard to accept someone who can come in and say, no, this is the direction we need to go, and here's why we need to do it. And we don't need to do split testing and all these things. Here's why we need to do that. And I think that's really the part of the craft where you're like, okay, what actually gives you the confidence? It's my ability in my craft. It's I don't have to do 50 rounds to get the answer. Usually my answer is not that far off from where we need to be. There may need to be refinement. We were talking about what's the difference between iterating and refinement. Iteration is a scary word to operators and CEOs because that means you don't know what you're talking about here. I don't tell you that because I'm respectful of you. But if I'm a CEO and I own multiple businesses and you say, well, I'm going to start here and then we're going to make it look better, I'll be like, nah, hell, no, no, no way. I want to know what it's going to look like now because I'm going to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I don't need to see these kind of, architect plans. And I think me having that experience of knowing, you're presenting to individuals who are worth a lot of money, their time is worth a lot of money. When you present, you have to have it fully thought out and try to win them over. And I think I've taken that into my personal and professional life as much as possible, and it's been very beneficial for me.
I love that. The one analogy you used before we hit record too about iteration is like you're building a house. You put a window here, and you're like, it might stay there, it might not. And if it
Right.
doesn't stay there, we might have to buy a totally new window, and just the cost that continues to creep up. And you're
Yeah.
just like, I just want to move in.
I just want, and you know what, that the word that you use is trust.
Hmm.
What would make me trust that architect with building my house? If he came in with just scraps and, hey, I want to walk you through some wireframes of my ideas. Like, if I have no point of reference of that, I might think this dude is out of his mind. Like, what are you talking about? I think I can kind of see this, and I think that I gain a lot of trust with my clients because I'm showing them what it's actually going to be first. There was a big conversation about high fidelity versus low fidelity. I mean, I could do it all. I mean, I could do it with pencil and paper, but I only have this amount of time and the client only has probably this amount of time. They've been probably playing along with me for the last week or so, like they have more time than they have, but they really want to see something. So I try to use the experience I got in the NBA, which the NBA is really about broad strokes, broad based pictures to bring in as many people as humanly possible to partake in the game entertainment. That's really what it's about. It's about selling seats. And I feel that design over the past few years has tried in its best way to be encompassing of everyone, and hey, we're all going to get there together and these are the steps, and yes, we've all figured out the steps. Yes, are we all in line? Let's go tell management this is what we got to do. And my advantage is I'm management and I can just look at it and go, no, that's not why I give your department $250,000. What are we talking about? What is this thing going to look like? And I think there's a lot of designers who don't have the experience, and they got, especially in the past year of tumultuous design, they got caught up in the dogma and the talking, and if we do, that's not business. Business is, I need a website. How long is that going to take? It's going to take us 8 weeks. Can you step me through the process of what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks? How what are we going to do to get there? And I always meant individuals who are mentoring. I'm like, don't show them any rough sketches. Don't do that. Don't do that. Remember, they're your client. Show them the beauty of here's what it's going to look like. Show them their own ideas. They said that they like this. Hey, I put together a mood board. Here's what you're thinking. Things like that keep people engaged and they're like, okay, yes, I know what's going to come up. And again, all of that confidence comes from working in the NBA at the highest level, knowing that I can, by myself, I can execute what I want, but knowing that I now it's not just me. I have the pedigree to go get developers. I got a pedigree to go get other seasoned designers or motion and bring that all together. And I think
Yeah.
that's really where you have to have that confidence of this is what I can bring. This is what I can deliver. Here's what I've done in the past. Either we can do it or we can part ways and I can go play with my kid.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you continue, like in our whole conversation, pre-record and after record, you strike this balance between making things look really good and justifying the business case. Like you're able to strike that. I don't think a lot of designers are able to do both. And so I think that's something I've recognized with you is like you're able to put those two things together and then present it and be like, this is going to look really good and it's going to do something. It's going to perform for you.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, if I could do it all over again and I had my control over the design industry, I would flip everything that everyone talks about now and put that in the back seat. None of that matters. What does matter to a owner is how can the next part help me get more successful or find more success than where I'm at. And if you can, with some of the things that you're designing, find some of those things, those improvements, those enhancements, that helps you get better velocity. And that's the name of the game. If you can move faster than your client, oh, I mean, you win left and right because they're expecting you to go 0 to 1. But when you're already at 1.4, they're like, wow, yeah, I can see where that is. And sometimes clients need that. Not everybody is blessed with imagination or the ability to see where you want it to be. But everybody who runs a company has a calculator.
Mm.
They can calculate time and they can calculate effort. They can calculate all of those things. And if you're not delivering that back to them, it's very simple for them to lose interest. It's really what you'll find very quickly. They won't answer. This is not as exciting as it was before. And so I'm big on design OKRs for myself. Like, what do I actually need to accomplish for this client? This client is moving to a new system or a new platform. I work with a lot of cities and municipalities, and so I asked them, what does success look like for you in 3 months and in 6 months? And if the project takes 2 months, then I basically try to, look for things with a month lens of analytics and just, it doesn't have to be huge. It just has to say, we went from $2 to $3. And that's big for a business that you can actually equate design changes. Hey, we put this form on, we moved it from where it was at, and we made it right on your homepage, or we created a system that made it a lot easier for anyone from an admin standpoint to get in, and that let them kind of do the math on those things. I mean, that honestly helps people in a tremendous way. Just not only be a better designer, but just be a better partner for your client.
How did you hone that business sense?
I started my first business when I was 19. I had a skateboard company. So I had a skateboard company and I worked for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I got access to individuals who had a lot of money very early in my life. And me at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I mean, honest, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I had a skateboard company. I would design the decks, and I had, this was back when they had like catalogs and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, I got a skateboard company, and I sponsored riders, and I got flow going to all of these things. And I was introduced to some minority owners for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and like that was kind of like my introduction into the reality of business. And they, kind of, I had a business plan with a lunch meeting. I was like, I'm going to show them my business plan about my skateboards. And it was Jack McGlynn, McGlynn Bakery. So it's famous city bakeries back in Minnesota. I'll never forget. I think I like printed it out and put it like in the cellophane with a little binder. I was like, here's my business plan. And they didn't even look at the business plan. They were like, hey, look, let me see those skateboards that you got. It's like, okay. I had, had a couple skateboards. I had like 2 decks at the time. And they were like, let me tell you something about your business plan. And I was like, all right. He was like, the business plan is the greatest lie you'll ever tell. I was like, what? It's like, how do you know what you're going to do in 5 years? How do you know what you're going to do tomorrow? Oh, it's all lies. You don't know what you can do. He held up the deck. He's like, this is your plan. You already have the decks. Tell me how you did it. Tell me how much more you need. Tell me what, if you got more, what can you get off of that? And that honestly is what shifted my mind from away from kind of the traditional, let me go look at research about business. And I just, have been very blessed to have actual business leaders in my life tell me, hey, if you need 5, ask for 10. Simple things like that that kind of give you this the understanding of how business works. And I use that within in design, and it really helped me to understand. I need to understand the client's goals and how much money they want to make. That's why we're doing this. That's why they called me. They didn't call me so we could be homies or be buddies. They called me because they have a problem. They want to solve it. But at the end of that problem, they would love to know how much more money am I going to make from my business or from my venture or from my entity. If you can do that, it just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's already that point of the show
There
where
it
we got
is.
to start wrapping things up. But two final questions for you. What has been your greatest parenting success? And what has been your greatest parenting failure or learning? And you can answer them in any order.
I think very simply, my greatest parenting success has been like being present for my son. I can honestly say that with including the pandemic, I have been, there for just about every moment. I frequently write that when I'll do an Instagram post. I'll say, I haven't missed anything. I was there when he broke his arm. I mean, I've seen just about everything, and I feel that he's at 8 now, and we have, kind of a growing relationship of mutual respect for one another. But I think that that probably has been my greatest thing that I can hang my hat on from a dad perspective of being proud of that, of just trying to be there and learn. I don't make any bones about being the best at anything, to be honest with you. So I'm learning as I go, and really just taking my time and enjoying. But it's awesome to see. Of course, we have our pictures synced in with the TV, and so do the wallpaper history, and you have all these old moments that pop up. And I think I always look back on some of those moments of not only can I remember them, I'm just happy that I was around to actually be in the picture. Sometimes
Mm,
there's pictures and you're like, oh man, what, you guys took those pictures? But I look at those pictures and I'm like, that's me. I took the picture and I was there. And, it kind of gives me a real sense of accomplishment from that standpoint. Long way to go. Hopefully, I can continue to get better and try and be a good example for my son. But, I think that's probably definitely one thing I can look back and say I didn't miss a moment.
yeah.
Now, from a failure standpoint, whew, boy, I think probably my biggest failure as a parent, I wish I would have gotten better at understanding the strain that was on my wife when my son was very, very, very young. I think we were both trying to figure out how to be good parents. And I wish that I had been a bit more understanding. Um, I can think back of times where here's what I believe we should do, or here's what I think we should do. And I wish that on some of those moments I would have just said, you know what, I think she's probably going through enough. Um, Whatever you would like. I think it's taken me some time to become a little bit more understanding and empathetic from it doesn't have to be the way that I want things to be from a parenting standpoint, especially when he was really little. And I wish I would have probably relented that a bit more because I think I might have missed out on opportunities for us to have a mutual understanding of what we wanted for Logan. I think as he got older, we both got really good. We're great partners now, but I wish in the first couple years I was so focused on, oh man, we want to have to do this and we got to do that. I was like, I think I probably could have done a much better job of just being a little bit more not so psycho about having a kid. And I think I would have had a better overall enjoyment of not only that process of being a dad, but also trying to be a good husband at the same time. Like, you don't understand it until you have one, how much time it takes from your relationship with one another. And I really underestimated that amount of, it's almost like we both have full time jobs, but our full time job is to be parents. And so having one kid, I could definitely see how people are like, yeah, when you get a second kid, it's much easier. You understand what you did wrong. You know how to talk about it. You're much more chill about things happening. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. I'm like, oh man, if I could take anything back, it's that. Like, hey, we don't need to compete about this stuff. Let's just be a better kind of co-unit, trying to figure out. We're both first time parents, so let's figure out the best way to kind of approach it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing about your story, sharing about your
Yeah, no problem.
parenting. If folks want to find you or connect with you, where can they do that?
You can always find me on Threads until further notice, but I think I'll just stay on Threads. Like I'm on Blue Sky if people want to follow me there, but Threads is usually where I'll crack jokes and I'll make some design observation. I think the latest thing I was talking about was the Walmart refresh, and everybody was up in arms and they need to do this. I'm like, have you been in a Walmart? Like, trust me, they needed to refresh. They didn't need to change anything. So that's where you can find me talking about design. You can find me on LinkedIn, cedfunches.design. I promised to write more. I made a promise to a colleague of mine. He was like, oh, you got to write more. I'm like, all right, I'll write more. But I mentor individuals. I don't charge an arm and a leg, and I just truly want to help individuals, especially through this time of design where people are trying to find their way and trying to be better at craft as well as executing design. And especially if there's a designer who's trying to get into business and get into the business side of, okay, I want to do this for myself. Where do I start?
Awesome. Well, I will link all those in the show notes too. And yeah, really appreciate you coming on, and it was a good conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.